Hi, my name is Dr. Randy Bach, and I am a primary care physician. I had my own office in Revere, Massachusetts for about 27 years, and I practiced primary care overall for about 30 years. The last few years I've been writing some books and doing some other non-medical activities. And one of the things I've been working on is a book to help narcotic addicts get their lives back. That prompted the beginning of this Facebook page called Get Your Life Back. And I had a lot of other videos on this at other points, as well as inspirational aspects for people dealing with life problems, principally perhaps addiction problems. My focus for maybe the last 10 years of my medical practice, in part, aside from all the regular medical problems, was kind of a burgeoning, growing fraction of my practice, which became about half my practice, in dealing with weaning off, tapering narcotic addicts all the way to sobriety, to full sobriety, including not being on any intermediary treatment narcotics. People are perhaps familiar with methadone, which has been around longer, but in the last maybe nearly 20 years, there's been Suboxone as well. Both of these, methadone and Suboxone, are themselves opiates of a sort, opiates, and if somebody were not addicted to narcotics and took one of the replacement narcotics, he or she would also get very sleepy and get a lot of the same issues and problems that people have with opiates themselves. So this is a concern, because what's happened over time is there's been far more what I call replacement treatment, maintenance treatment for narcotic issues, and less in the way of what had previously been the standard, which is getting all the way to sobriety. Just as a quick example, there's always been an alcohol problem, probably in this country for its entire existence, probably nearly as long as humans have been around. But when people are having issues with severe addiction to alcohol, they don't get replacement alcohol. They generally will be tapering off or withdrawing from alcohol within a few days, and they'll get all the other treatment groups, therapy, AA, that kind of thing, and try to rework and reorder to get their lives back as well. But there's never any talk of replacement alcohol. People with a whiskey problem don't get some kind of clear liquid that's called vodka. But in the realm of narcotic treatment, that is the case. So that's always been kind of an interesting difference between the two, and there, it's a little bit of a puzzle why that is. I think part of it has to do with the legality of alcohol and the illegality of narcotics, and we can get into that at a later point. But I just wanted to use this opportunity to, bring about my idea for a treatment, I guess a manual, a guide, not just for treatment, but how to get out of treatment. I think that there's a little bit of, an addiction maze, a difficulty in getting away from treatment. We don't see this again to the same extent with alcohol treatment, which tends to be, finite within a matter of a few days. Therapy can go on, for much longer periods of time, no doubt. But we don't see people, as I said, with replacement alcohol, we don't see people getting the longer-term treatment that they do with narcotic replacement treatment. Methadone treatment came about in the United States in the probably in the mid 1960s, but principally in the 1970s, and then it became more popular and more used as soldiers came back from Southeast Asia. Many of them having pretty substantial heroin habits, with heroin and opium being so inexpensive in the Far East and Southeast Asia. People actually, there's a little bit of story about that, and we can get to that perhaps if we continue this and do later episodes. And if you have questions about that kind of thing, I'd be happy to go over it. It became, kind of a growing treatment modality for narcotic addiction, and it became what's called the maintenance model, keeping people on methadone for not just a short period of time, but for years and decades and perhaps entire lifetimes to treat the underlying narcotic addiction. And this also coincides with the kind of popularization, the increasing use of the addiction as a disease model. Previously, addiction was seen as an addiction. There are other addictions, cigarettes, for instance, that people have and are not considered a disease. It's a matter of stopping them and moving on to something else. It might be a matter of replacing that addiction with something else that can captivate and occupy the mind. With cigarettes, there were various kind of fake cigarettes. People using things in their mouth. I remember a long time ago there were these plastic cigarettes, and obviously now there's nicotine gum and nicotine patch, and again, I guess in a sense those are partially replacement, but they're temporary for the most part. But people would figure out other ways to occupy themselves to get away from their addiction. Now, no doubt there are probably some people who are more prone to addiction than others, than other people, that is. But the question remains whether it's the best thing to treat addiction as a disease. Diabetes is a disease, and if you had type 1 severe diabetes where you don't make any insulin at all, a physician would be crazy to take away that insulin. I mean, that would be fatal for the patient. So, having diabetes as an addiction model is very useful and reasonable and medically efficacious, and anything else would be absurd. I don't think quite the same holds for opiates. People spend, even people who are severely addicted to opiates, maybe spending $200 a day, purchasing heroin or OxyContin or something of that sort. Even they likely spend, decades of their own life as children and adolescents and into, certain parts of their adulthood, not using narcotics, and even now stop from time to time. That's not quite the case or the opportunity or the possibility for somebody already having type 1 diabetes, that they don't have the option of stopping and starting insulin, whereas a lot of people with opiate addictions can stop and start. It may be difficult, and they may have withdrawal, which very likely they will, but it's not to say it's impossible. People who go to prison, in the unfortunate circumstances of coincident crime with the narcotic habit, they will have withdrawal, but they won't have fatalities. It's different with the case of alcohol, for instance, which is actually a far more dangerous thing to withdraw from than opiates. Nonetheless, people are encouraged to withdraw from opiates. So if it's strictly on a danger basis, we would keep people on alcohol and stop the opiates, but that's actually the opposite of what principally occurs. I have this book in galleys, it's called. It's a book term. That is to say, it's probably 90% ready, and I'm going over it, and I'd like to kind of present it to people. So I'd like to take this opportunity to explain a little bit about what the book Withdraw to Freedom is. So Withdraw to Freedom is intended as an empowering guidebook, both for those addicted to opiates currently and those imminently receiving treatment, about to, and for their loved ones. In a way, it seems unlikely that narcotic addicts, in their deepest despair, pursuing an active drug habit, will spend time to sit down and read an entire book of any type, cover to cover. However, the information and guidance from this book will remain available once they've stabilized and can show interest. Hopefully, family members will have even more opportunity and time and perspective to use this book as both a resource and a conversation starter. Withdraw to Freedom provides a vantage point from which addicts, family members, and treatment professionals can meet, understand, and coordinate addiction treatment, tailoring it for individuals' specific needs, not necessarily those of the treatment clinics and their needs. If you're ever lost and disoriented, finding a map's "You Are Here" sign is a relief. It clarifies one's position, reorients your goal, and strategizes the best path, including how to exit. So much within a narcotic addict's secretive world is kept from view. There are similarities even once treatment begins. The book, Withdraw to Freedom, intends to clarify the various pathways within this difficult treatment maze. Admittedly, it does so with a particular perspective implicit in the title, the importance of freedom, emphasizing hope, opportunity, growth, fulfillment, and soul. It comes from a minority viewpoint within the addictionology field. Nearly universally, long-term maintenance is encouraged over attempts to taper and withdraw to sobriety. Withdraw to Freedom advocates judicious and appropriate tapering. Entering treatment, never easy, is sometimes less difficult than leaving it. Maintenance-style treatment centers have mixed motivations in letting people, that is, in a sense, their customers, leave, move on. Furthermore, recovering addicts can have insecurity leaving the comfort of a clinic and the reassurance of a pill like methadone or Suboxone behind. Once in treatment, freedom from drugs and from the replacement drugs may be the last thing on an active addict's mind. Self-confidence is in short supply, whether from personality, prior events, or recent addiction havoc, the way it's upturned people's lives. A period of stabilization and reorientation is clearly beneficial. The question, perhaps the largest question brought up by this book, is basically how long should that period be? How long should you be on treatment? The time frame for recovery of spirits, your moods from life's other emotional traumas leading to grief, the death of a parent, spouse, or child, breakups, divorce, failure, losing a job, getting kicked out of a group, and even worse, arrest, imprisonment, is on the order of 4 to 6 months. Humans are not robots, so results are going to vary. Now, people retain, perhaps longer the kind of nostalgia and the sense of loss, but within months, they're ready to pick up, start over, and meet new challenges. You've probably heard this, say, alluring and seemingly sensible phrase repeated as mantra. I don't know if you ever heard this. If we can save only one life, then it will all have been worth it. Of course, there are competing philosophies regarding saving lives. At the extreme, for instance, if all of society stayed completely locked down, for the next 20 years, as happened during COVID, perhaps there would be 0 lives lost to infectious illnesses like COVID. But if we did so, we might very well starve societally and decay from a lack of commerce and industry, or individually drink ourselves into a stupor from boredom. We've already seen opiate deaths go up about 30% this last year. The point is that, of course, there are trade-offs. Overly aggressive attempts to eliminate all possibilities of danger by unintentionally limiting individuals' challenges limit the quality of life broadly and often fail even in the specified goal of saving one life by, in a sense, sacrificing other lives in other ways. Medical doctors, well, we have an expression in Latin, primum non nocere, which means first, do no harm. A practicing physician, however, can never make a blanket promise that there will never be any harm. Even an aspirin has potential side effects, as does every other type of treatment. Consulting with the patient finds the correct balance of benefit versus risk, factoring in the patient's own circumstances. An aggressive cancer treatment, for instance, might make sense for a 40-year-old patient, but not a 90-year-old. Certain otherwise preferred medications are avoided when a woman is pregnant, for instance. In both of those cases, the treatment itself comes at a cost of some potential danger. In the realm of narcotic addiction, this risk-benefit ratio includes personal liberty. Some narcotics stay clean and sober only while in prison, yet no counselor recommends prison as treatment, although residential treatment has some similarities, to be honest with you. Tapering narcotics gradually until sobriety is reached is a long accepted form of detoxification from which the patient returns to real life without a promise of forever, but with a lot of hope for right now, and with, in a sense, more freedom and trust from others. The harm reduction argument, which is quite pervasive in narcotic addiction treatment, states that maintenance therapy, replacing the previously addicting narcotic with a prescribed replacement narcotic, should be continued for years and possibly decades so as to prevent any possible return to drug use and substantially less likely, some subsequent overdose death. We could look at our children the same way, keep them indoors, safe, and none of them would ever die in, for instance, an automobile accident, skiing injuries, or drowning. But is really, that any way for our children to grow? I don't think they grow mentally if they're restricted in that way. There has to be a relationship of trust as children become adolescents, testing the waters around them, literally or figuratively. Without trying and failing, there can be no experience. Without experience, there can be no reliable knowledge. Without knowledge and experience, there can be no maturity. Without maturity, there's no self-sufficiency or rational adventuring. Without all of these, there's no achievement, no meaningful work, no satisfaction. It's ironic and unfortunate for some, but also very human, that there can be no real success without at least a possibility of failure. The return to addiction, relapse, is carefully considered, but never removed as a possibility in the treatment of our nation's single largest substance addiction, alcoholism. At the moment, acutely, alcoholics are weaned from their, we'll call it drug of choice, alcohol. Unlike with recovering opiate or narcotic addicts, their methadone and their Suboxone, there's no maintenance by replacement alcohol. There's no such thing as a vodka maintenance clinic. There is a continuum of ancillary helpful care, similar to with narcotics. There's therapy, there's observation, there's groups, there's counseling, and sympathy naturally. But the only maintenance expected from or of recovering addicts is hopefully of one's, recovering of their calm spirit, their focus, and positive direction. Those sensibilities are maintained by adherence to the 12 steps of AA and or faith in God, devotion to family, rededication to work. It's debatable whether Alcoholics Anonymous would ever have been created if alcoholism had been seen in the 20th century the same way opiate addiction is seen and has been seen in the 21st century. Practically a deficiency disease is requiring replacement from the same class of drug that overturned the addict's life and order in the first place. So the opiates is what made everything bad, and we're going to give them opiates. The United States medical and governmental coordination towards methadone maintenance began in the 1970s, as I mentioned, and expanded in every decade since, adding Suboxone maintenance in the 2000s. Whether it's related or not, the various accelerated phases of the opioid epidemic coincide with increases in maintenance treatment, both in the number and the reach and the depth of maintenance treatment. The addict's drug habit is not diminished. It's only exchanged for the treatment narcotic, methadone or Suboxone. Any stoppage in treatment yields someone still addicted to opiates and immediately hungry for a new drug, whether it's legal or not. And I think this is ignored in a lot of the aspects of Suboxone and methadone treatment. Of course, we don't treat every child, every adolescent, every adult completely the same. There are some for whom there should be greater caution. There's some who immediately get it, who move on. Amongst narcotic addicts, there will be some similar variability. This book that I'm writing and will have out soon doesn't aim for a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not recommending the removal of maintenance therapy for those quite satisfied with it or totally insecure about leaving it. This book, though, does acknowledge that there is more to life than receiving. People have an emotional need to contribute. Work confers dignity. The compliments and the commendations and applause received after every accomplishment, they reinforce our best efforts. Diligence is a virtue. Continuation. Our heroes, both in legend and comic books and so forth, and in reality, are those who accomplish tasks against the odds through perseverance. Maintenance is, maintenance treatment is a bit as it sounds. It's maintaining a position while moving to sobriety is an action. All things being equal, the latter, the second one, brings with it more of the heroic sensibility. It's better, in a sense, to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And in a way, it's better to try to get to sobriety than never to try. This book recommends that people who are addicted give themselves the chance to believe they can do better. While not leaving their previous problems fully behind, they may still reasonably be expected to adhere to substance avoidance, narcotic avoidance, as thoroughly as a recovering and sober alcoholic, in the 12 step. That means weaning from their previous drug of choice and or its replacement, Suboxone, methadone, and pursuing better avenues of actions across all aspects of life. Those in AA understand this involves living more wholesomely and simply by means of letting go and letting God, whereby, in conjunction with mentors, family, and community, disappointments are navigated, relapses are avoided, and when they're not, they're dealt with as learning experiences, and not removal forever from any later similar attempt at sobriety. Doesn't mean you should never try again if you failed, relapsing with alcohol. To that end, this book's emphasis is not on the not too long, not too short approach of multiple months of narcotic via Suboxone by prescription and treatment. But Suboxone, by virtue of being merely a pill and not a magic wand, requires for patients graduating to longer-term sobriety an emphasis on doing the right thing, having goals, anticipating success by planning for it, and similarly and necessarily leaving unsavory and oftentimes criminal behaviors behind. With these two tools, an actively concerned patient, coordinating with family and friends, can step away from addiction and ultimately addiction treatment as well. So we're talking about, using multiple months of tapering and planning and acting in the right way. In which case, somebody previously addicted can both withdraw from narcotics and to a safer destination, freedom from endless treatment or drug, freedom to choose a better life. This duality gives rise to our book's title, Withdraw to Freedom, Getting Out of the Addiction Maze, with the understanding that freedom for some is a frightening prospect, but for nearly everybody, it's a persistent dream, even those addicted and even those on treatment and even those on maintenance, even for decades. This book doesn't see the previously active addiction as necessarily life-defining or life-limiting. George W. Bush, the president, conquered sobriety before politics. For the rest of us, without presidential fathers, there will be a far different, less glamorous endpoint, but similar struggles. We aim to maximize possibilities, beginning a pathway of hope. Nonetheless, I acknowledge that there's a spectrum of drug use and individual users, each presenting different respective capabilities of surviving and thriving within a tapering withdrawal detoxification plan. Without any type of crystal ball, how would we determine who is going to be successful? We don't do this in basketball, baseball. We have predictions, but we can never be fully right. Somebody on a first go-round with drugs using very low doses or pills rather than IV and having done it for decades might be more likely to be successful. However, should we not also theoretically give everybody the same opportunity and likelihood and encouragement, even those who are more hardened to narcotic use previously? It seems almost, kind of a prejudice to deny them if they're willing to do it. The spiritual dimension, faith in God and in oneself, as well as others' faith in you, can provide a pathway even for those previously lost. There is a veil of mystery shrouding much of addiction treatment. It's unlike the more, say, universal aspects of medical care. Everybody gets a cold, everybody gets a physical, everybody gets injured, but only a small minority of people receive addiction treatment, and they don't necessarily talk about it openly. The book I have ready to go won't open up every aspect. It won't answer every question of narcotic addiction treatment, but it does intend to provide a perspective and a rationale for people to understand more, to become more knowledgeable, in a sense, to become like a consumer, a purchaser of addiction treatment and its options. As you buy other things on Amazon, you weigh them, You compare them to other things. Something similar should be done with narcotic treatment. The anti-tapering argument that relapse can bring overdoses can bring death, leaves out the alternate, currently existing situation that there's a cost and loss of life potential from the time and effort spent in long-term maintenance, along with the overdoses still, including from methadone itself. It's harder to overdose from Suboxone, but it also does occur with benzos. Any abrupt stop to maintenance replacement opioid treatment immediately returns, as I said, to a pre-existing narcotic habit and a need to hunt for often illegal opiate drugs. Moreover, peer group creatures that we are, recovering addicts in long-term maintenance programs may come to match certain of their treatment friends, say, diminished expectations of returning to a life focused on accomplishment at home, work, and soul. That is to say, they might turn a little bit more like the hardened longer-term methadone addicts, whereas tapering, may lead to episodes of setback or relapse. You could say that, but the more optimistic among us, emphasize that tapering is the only route to sobriety. It's more appealing to those who want to leave the addiction phase of life behind. My book is not going to encourage those who are not ready and willing. For many people, maintenance is a deep comfort, and this book is not going to disrupt those lives and their treatment relationships in any way. This is something you do if you want to do. It's not forcing anybody to do something they don't want to do. This book's other goal is to help families help their addicted loved ones. Part of that is going to mean learning a drug addict's excuses and sometimes lies. There's love the sinner, hate the sin. That requires a recognition of which behaviors need to be shed, which behaviors should be encouraged. Expecting more from someone is a blessing for both of you. How will it end? There are no promises, but it's likely that the paths that lead to greater satisfaction are more emotionally sustainable. Previously addicted people can bring their well-tested resourcefulness to a task that can help improve their lives and improve those of their loved ones. They're often very good at getting drug and so forth, but they can use that same cleverness in a better way. Sobriety feels essentially the greater achievement. People who are very good observers of their own emotions generally understand that, and most of the addicts are. So I'm hoping this book becomes a vehicle that can provide reinforcement and strength for those greater goals, the greater possibilities, the greater sense within ourselves that we can do better and we can do more. And if you'd like to hear more about this book, please feel free to comment. I'd be happy to open an engagement with people, and I'm happy to listen. Again, I'm not recommending that a pathway to sobriety is eminently easy, but it is something that people, I think, have in the back of their mind as a way to live their life better and to its fullest. Those people who want to continue with maintenance treatment, Suboxone and or methadone, and feel fulfilled and happy in that, they certainly have that possibility of staying with what they're doing. So I think I'm going to finish here, and I enjoyed speaking with you. Please let me know if there are things you'd like to hear about as we go on.